All right, so if there are any questions as we go along, like I said, just drop those in the comments. My husband, Tillman Davis, is on the call today on Zoom, and he is a licensed property tax consultant, so he works with this kind of thing all the time, and he'll be on to answer any questions as they come in or at the end. So if you have any special situations or things that you would like to ask him that I probably will not know about, then he'll be on and listening in. So this class is really focusing on property taxes. This is not focusing on your taxes because I am the least qualified person possible to advise you on your taxes. But I'm hoping that I can provide some value for you to share with your clients, and just going to be talking about a lot of questions that come up throughout the home buying process and thereafter. We're going to talk about homestead exemptions, ag and wildlife exemptions, and some other things. So let's get started. So we're going to go over the difference between market value, assessed value, and appraised value. I know that's very basic stuff, but understanding that and being able to explain that to clients is essential, and it will come up frequently. If you've been in this business for any time at all, you've probably had that question come up about why your County has something different than what the market value is. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We are going to talk about the different types of exemptions, how the homestead exemption actually works, because there's a lot of confusion and misconception about that. And we're going to talk about how to protest your property taxes, tips for new homeowners that you should be sharing with your people, and also a few reminders there in the end. So we'll get right to it. So most people don't understand that market value is different from assessed value, and that's different from appraised value. And then there's an appraised value that you get when you're going through the purchase process, and then there's an appraised value on BCAD, and that's very confusing to people. So I think it's really essential for realtors to know the difference in those things, because undoubtedly you're going to get a client who is going to ask questions about it, usually it's the people who are just educated enough to know that they should check the property tax assessment or check the appraisal district website on the property that they're interested in. So they're knowledgeable enough to do that, and with kind of understand how it works enough to do that, but then they don't understand why there's a discrepancy in the market value versus the assessed value. So the assessed value is a dollar value that's assigned to a property to measure applicable taxes, and that's assigned by the appraisal district. It also depends on whether or not sellers have ever protested the value. So that's a huge thing that I communicate to my clients whenever they're asking why one value is so low and the other is so high for seemingly like properties. That person could have protested their property taxes year over year. The market value is a little bit more data driven. So it's how much a home would sell for on the open market under normal conditions. And we, of course, get that value by looking at comparable sales, actual sold data for price and closing costs and all of that. So then appraisers take it a step further when they're in the process, and they have, all the little adjustments that they make to come up with the appraised value that they give. I've had clients ask before, why do we have to get an appraisal? Because BCAD already has the appraised value on their website. So why do we have to get an appraisal? And I think that it's just important to discern that that's different. The appraised value on BCAD is different from the appraisal that the lender will order and require, and the independent valuation of the property that has to be performed before you can close on a house with a lender. So it's important to communicate that. And then when I have clients, usually it's a situation where the house they're looking at is, say, priced at $300,000, and the assessed value on BCAD is at $350,000. And people are worried. That makes people worry about what's wrong with this house. What's going on here? Why is it priced so much lower than what BCAD says that it should be? Well, people have probably gone in and protested that tax value year over year to get it so low. If you look at others in the neighborhood, they're probably way higher because their owners have never protested. And then on the flip side, you'll have people who say the house is priced at $300,000, but BCAD has it on at 250, well, I guess I said that backwards. If BCAD has it on at 250, they've gone in and protested the value. If BCAD has it on at 350, they've never protested the value. And so it's just continued to raise and raise over time. And I have a couple examples of that a little bit later on where I can show you how to look for that. But it's something that's really confusing to people. I mean, I just got mixed up explaining it. So I really have to hone in and look at all the details on the appraisal district whenever people ask those questions. My quickest answer is the assessed value is a value that's placed on the property for the purpose of taxing that property. And the market value is something based on data. It is based on the current market, how quickly it's moving, what these sellers and their realtor think that they can sell this house for, and what it actually sells for. So there is a difference there, and it's important for people to understand that difference. But I think as realtors, that burden is a little bit higher for us. We really need to understand how to explain that. I always go to the fact that some people protest their taxes and others don't, and that's why there's so much discrepancy into like properties in the same neighborhood. I just assume that one person has probably protested. We'll talk a little bit about property tax exemptions. So these are all the different types of exemptions that you can have on your property. We'll talk about Homestead a little bit more in depth in a minute. Over 65 is a very simple application to file. You just have to file it and submit it for people who own the house that are over 65. If the surviving spouse is at least 55 and the over 65 person passes, the person who is 55 or over does have to reapply. They qualify, but they have to reapply after their spouse passes away. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. If it doesn't, Tillman can cover it a little bit more in depth in a minute. But that exemption is very, very easy to file. The disabled veteran is something that we run into a lot in San Antonio. We're fortunate to have a lot of veterans in San Antonio, and with that comes a lot of different conversations about percentage of disability, how that's going to affect them property tax wise. If someone is 100% disabled, they get 100% reduction, so they don't pay any property taxes, and that greatly improves their purchasing power when they're looking for a home. With someone who is 30% disabled, 50%, 70%, that's kind of a sliding scale on what the reduction is, anywhere from I think 7,000 to 12,000. Most veterans that I have worked with who have some sort of percentage of disability know exactly what they need to do. They've either been through it before or the VA is helping them out with that. So the best way that you can support them is to just ask if they need any help, or if they need help getting the documentation that they need to submit. With the ag or wildlife exemption, like I said, Tillman will cover that a little bit more in a minute, but basically how it works is you designate a portion. If there's a house on the property, you designate a portion of that property that's right around the house as the homestead, basically, where the house is, and everything else that's used for ag purposes is what you get the exemption on. You have to show that you're using it for agricultural purposes. So, you have to have a certain number of goats or a certain number of cows, or you have to have some sort of fields planted that you're harvesting. So that's basically how the ag exemption works. And then the wildlife exemption, that you have to have the ag exemption first. So the wildlife, I think, gets a little complicated. And I think that for both ag and wildlife, those are something that you need to talk to the appraisal district about and make sure that you understand the guidelines for each different county, because I used to think it was, straight across the board, 10 acres for ag, 20 acres for wildlife. And it does vary a little bit, and it's a little bit different depending on the county. But in general, those can save you a ton of money. And so they're really, really good to keep. The main thing, Tillman and I were talking the other night, And the main thing that you need to tell clients as a realtor, I think, is that once they, if they purchase a property with an ag exemption, they still have to file the exemption in their name within a year, year and a half, however long after they purchase the property, so that it will stick with them for that year. So if you don't let that fall off, if you have a client purchase a property with an ag exemption and they do not refile the exemption paperwork, then that will fall off and they could be subject to back taxes for that falling off. So the ag exemption is something that we should definitely know about and recognize on properties. You should definitely advertise when you have a property that is ag exempt, because that's huge savings. I have a client right now who's moving here from Katy, and they are looking for specifically an ag exempt property in the Bernie area. So if you have one, let me know. But they have to have the ag exemption. No, they're not going to mess with applying for one over 5 years or anything like that. So that's something to keep in mind. And then disabled homestead, to be honest, don't know a ton about disabled homestead, but I know that you must prove via note from the doctor that you're not able to have gainful employment because of your disability. So can save someone quite a bit of money, but the Texas Comptroller website has a lot more information on that. All right, let's talk about homestead exemption. So this is what we see the very most, and here talked about the most. And I even had some misconceptions about this the first few years that I was in real estate. So first of all, you must live in the property on January 1st. I put must in quotations because Tillman and I go back and forth on this. I'm looking at him on the side. We go back and forth on this all the time because he, as a property tax consultant, he says that you do not have to live in the property on January 1st. His sister just closed on a house 2 weeks ago, so January 8th or something like that. And he's advising her to go ahead and file the homestead exemption, basically make them tell you no. And he believes that they're going to give her the homestead exemption. I believe that we're told January 1st, and so it's difficult to guarantee that, but we can also advise to go ahead and apply for it. So go ahead and apply for the homestead exemption, even if you purchase the home after January 1st and you were not living in it on January 1st, and see if they'll give it to you. They might not, don't guarantee it as their realtor, but it's worth a shot and it might save them a few $100. The applications are found on BCAT or whatever appraisal district website. They're about 3 pages long, very simple, and they're due by April 30th. I think one of the best values and one of the best touches you can do in January is to send out the homestead exemption to, you could do it to your whole database or just to the people who closed last year. You can go in and look up past clients who closed 3 years ago and see if they have a homestead exemption on their property. And if they don't, make sure and send that to them. That's something that I've been working on doing. I was hoping to send it by mail, but I ended up just sending it via email to clients this year. And I think clients appreciate that. You're showing your value going forward past the date of closing. And that's really important to people. And it I think makes an impression on people that you're taking that time to do that for them. I used to think that the homestead exemption took $25K off the whole value of the property, but it actually only takes $25K off of the ISD amount, and then there are some other amounts that are affected by it as well. So if you'll look, this particular property, it's in Hollywood Park. It's taxed by the city of Hollywood Park. Total tax rate is 2.49. So Hollywood Park doesn't have an HOA, but it does have a little bit of a higher tax rate. So that's something that you can look in here on any property and see what makes up their total tax rate and communicate that to your clients so that they know. And that might make a difference for people. People might not want to pay an HOA, but then they might be basically paying an HOA by paying for higher city taxes or something like that. So the appraised value for this property is $322. And over here, since they do have a homestead exemption, it shows what their taxable value is. So you can see down here, the Northeast ISD is the highest, has the highest tax rate of all of these things accumulated to make the 2.49. So this is where you're going to see the most effects of a reduced value. That's usually the case. Usually the ISD tax is the highest. Several of these don't change. So Alamo Community College, University Health Systems, Bexar County, those don't change at all on the taxable value here. The only ones that changed are Northeast, Bexar County Road and Flood, SA River Authority, and these are set reductions. So any property that has this tax applied to it, it's 0.0023668, so it's not very much that's taking. It ends up being $75. So every property has a 3K reduction here when they have a homestead exemption applied. Now that is not a lot. When you look over here at how much that totals, that 3K is not really saving very much. And the 5K right here for the SA River Authority is also not saving very much at all. But when you get down to this one with the 25K reduction on the highest taxable rate or tax rate, that does make a difference. All in all, it's going to save someone a few $100 when they have a homestead exemption. So it's not anything groundbreaking, but most people are happy to save a few $100, and they're happy that you've advised them to do this to save them a few $100. So down here, it shows the taxes with current exemptions and the taxes without current exemptions. And you can figure out that difference of about $300. The market value that the county has can go up any amount, but the assessed value can only go up 10% a year. So the part that they're taxed on can only go up 10% a year. Sometimes you'll see, I can't remember what year it was exactly. I think it was 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. You saw the taxable value go up dramatically. Or the appraised values across the city. It seemed like they raised everyone across the board at least 10%, and people were really mad in Bexar County because everyone went up. Some people went up. We had some friends who had contacted Tillman about helping them with their property taxes, and they had gone up 100K from the previous year. Now, the 100K more is what they had actually paid for the property, but they had fought the taxes that year, and then the next year the appraisal district just raised it right back up. So they raised that value up 100K, but they were only able to tax them on 10%, and they fought it again. They fight their taxes every year. How to protest your property taxes. So notices go out on April 1st. You have 30 days or until May 15th to submit a protest. Then your hearing is scheduled. You're allowed one reschedule for your hearing without cause. And then the hearing happens. Most entities are still offering virtual hearings or phone call hearings. I think it's best to take comps with you so you can show other sales. And I'm sure you guys as realtors have had clients or people ask every year what the comps are for their neighborhood because they're protesting tax purposes. This is a great value add that you can advertise to your clients come April. Make sure you're protesting your property taxes. Contact me if you need comps for last year to support your protest. So that's something that I feel like comes around every year, especially with Tillman and working in property taxes. They'll contact him about protesting, and then it gets back to me to pull comps undoubtedly every time. But reach out to your clients, advertise it on social media, tell people, communicate to people that they can protest that value and that you can help them advise them on that. This is the slide I was talking about earlier that shows the difference when someone protests their value and when they don't. So these two properties are in Hollywood Park. This is the one that I showed earlier. So you can see it's assessed at $322. This is a property that is almost identical. We know both of these people. We know their houses are about the same square footage. They're the same style. They're the same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, same finish out. This one is assessed at $322 and this one is assessed at $403. 403 is probably pretty close to the actual market value of this property. The 322 is way low. This property has a detached garage, a detached two-car garage, so attached two-car and detached two-car. It has some amazing, amazing trees. It backs up to a green belt. It has a lot of great selling factors. They've updated the kitchen fully. It's a gorgeous kitchen. This one just has the two-car garage. It does not back up to a green belt. It has neighbors all around it. It is not updated. They haven't updated the kitchen yet, but this is being taxed the same as the market value, whereas this person goes in and protests their value every single year. So you can see that they've just had slight increases throughout the last few years. This one started at 339 in 2017, which is probably around the time that they bought this. I can't remember exactly when they bought this house, but it's increased, 10 to 20K every year, 30K this last time. One thing to note as well, the land market value stayed pretty low on these three, 2017, 2018, 2019, and then it jumped up this last year. Again, this is probably more accurate to the market value of this land in Hollywood Park. We all know Hollywood Park's a really hot area, but I doubt they'll be very successful at getting that part lowered. But this is just crazy. Looking at it and knowing these two properties and knowing this one is being taxed so much higher. So we'll be reaching out to them about fighting their property taxes this year because it is a huge discrepancy. And if you dig in and look at some of these things in neighborhoods that you're showing in or areas that you're working in, you'll see a lot of this. You'll see the improvements, what the county has them at as just crazy sometimes.
And Kendall, one thing I'll add there on that slide, obviously, like she said, they're two very comparable properties. Having known both owners, we're familiar with the properties. And so a lot of people might look at that and say, hey, why is there such a discrepancy? And as she alluded to, in Hollywood Park, it's a little bit of an older community, but most of the homes are very, for lack of a better term, custom type homes to where they're not all the same. They may have similar square footages. But a lot of times with the appraisal district, when they can find comps, a lot of them are the higher end comps. So you've seen a number of folks come in, buy homes on the cheap side of the price, and then fix them up and then resell them as a flip. And so a lot of times the appraisal district will take that and say, hey, we have this high dollar per square foot sale. We're going to just apply it across the board. And you can see where it's important to go in and fight, because the lower property tax value that you can see on the screen at 322, they've been able to go in and point out, okay, for our home, we haven't updated all the bathrooms. We haven't updated all the bedrooms. We still may have certain styles from 1970 when the home was built that are more applicable to us, as opposed to this home that's been completely gutted, renovated, and done up to the nines. And that same sort of thinking or logic by the appraisal district has been applied to the home that's valued at 403, but they haven't gone in and showed, hey, here's why our home is not like this sale that you have. So it's always important for clients to understand that, hey, if there's something specific to your property that may make it a little different from the comps that they're looking at, make sure to point that out. And as Kendall alluded to, I mean, it kind of offers you that chance to stay in constant contact with your client to say, hey, in April, hey, watch for your notice. In June, if you need help with comps for your property taxes, let me know. Things like that, just to kind of stay in constant contact to help them on that side with their property taxes.
Perfect. That's really important, especially in these neighborhoods where you're seeing a lot of updating going on. If it's a neighborhood like Dignality or something, I think you can probably find a good way using some comps that haven't been updated yet to get your value lowered. So leverage that however you can. So I'll breeze through this because we're running a little bit low on time. Some tips for new homeowners that you really need to be sharing with them. Do not pay someone to file your homestead exemption. That is a simple form that takes 3 minutes to fill out and send back to the appraisal district. Companies will send letters to new homeowners saying, we'll file your homestead exemption for $300. It's just not worth it to pay somebody to do that. So make sure that they know how to do that themselves and know not to pay someone to do that. If they have any questions about it and you can't answer them, ask on Shift Talk or something. I mean, it's just silly to pay somebody for filing a homestead exemption. People will also be paid to protest your taxes, and I think that's kind of a case-by-case basis on if it's worth it or not and how much savings they will have. You do not have to tell the county what you paid for the property. Texas is a non-disclosure state. In California, you do have to disclose. You have to tell them what you paid for the property and they will tax you at that amount. But in Texas, you do not have to tell them that. We had a family member just last week call us and say, hey, she had fixed up her old little farmhouse and that was probably 100 years old. And she's fixed it up less than 1,000 square feet. They know that the appraisal district knows that she's fixed it up and they want to come look at it and they want to scope it out and they want to know how much she paid to update it and all of these things. And she doesn't have to tell them. They can ask nicely. They can send a letter that says, hey, we're updating our records. How much did you spend on updates for this property? But you don't have to tell them that. Withholding that information in this case is not lying. It's allowed because it's a non-disclosure state. It will take a while for the correct information to show up on the appraisal district website. Sometimes it can take months. We purchased a property in September right before tax bills came out. And the tax bill, I guess, went to the previous owners. We never saw it. We knew to pay those taxes, but they didn't collect them at closing because we closed in September before the bill was out. And we never got a bill for it. So if you're in that weird limbo time frame, closing, then make sure that your clients know that they are responsible for those taxes. I know we all know that, but just reinforce to them. Maybe send an email out to your database in November saying, just a reminder that if you pay your taxes before December 31st, you have some savings. They'll give you some savings if you pay it before the end of the year versus waiting until January or something like that. Just make sure that you're informing them on those things so they don't become delinquent on that. Verify the information that the appraisal district has for your property when the notices are going out in April. Make sure that they have the correct address on file. Make sure that they have all the correct info for you because you're going to want to get that notice. You're going to want to make sure you get the communication from them, the tax bill in the fall, all of those things. So make sure that information is up to date. Just check BCAD regularly. It'll usually show the deed transfer pretty early on, but it's all the other information, the mailing information and contact info that doesn't get updated for months. A few reminders, sellers will be, these are all, this is a certain situation that some friends of ours encountered recently, so it was kind of top of mind. Sellers will be subject to back taxes if the previous owner's exemption does not fall off with the transfer of the property. So we have some good friends who the people that they purchased the house from probably 6 years ago, they had an over 65 exemption. Our friends are in their 30s. The appraisal district never updated to delete that over 65 exemption. So they've told us about this over time as a like, haha, we're saving this on taxes and this is really great. And then they went to sell their property a couple months ago and they were slammed with a bill for back taxes because once they pulled the tax records, they saw these people are not over 65. They never filed for this exemption. This is from the previous owner, and it ended up being several $1,000s. So if you hear someone talking about, and Tillman was telling them along the way, that's going to come up. That's going to come up. You're going to get that coming back around to you at some point. And sure enough, it did. And it was very unfortunate that they had to deal with that. The law, Tillman can touch on this, but the law is heavily written to support, I guess, the seller. Is that right?
It's written in favor of the appraisal district. And with that, it's, hey, there's not a lot of outs. And so, whether you knew it was an issue or not, you knew you were supposed to pay your taxes. And that goes along with the other point Kendall was making about verifying the information, making sure it's correct for your client, especially if they buy around that tax bill mail out time, which is September, October. Make sure the mailing address is correct, because even if the appraisal district mails it to the wrong address, you as a property owner are responsible for knowing that your taxes are due. And so if you don't pay it, you're delinquent. That's on you. It's not the appraisal district's fault if they didn't update their records in a timely fashion. So, it's never a bad idea to reach out November and remind folks, hey, watch for your property tax bill, because you're going to be responsible for it, whether it's mailed to you or not.
Perfect. Yeah, that was a harsh reality once they got to the closing table. I touched on this a little bit earlier. For ag and wildlife exemptions, you do have to reply once you purchase the property. And I think the biggest takeaway, hopefully, is that there are several, for you guys as realtors, there are several different ways that you can add value to your clients. You can provide them with homestead exemption papers. You can remind them to protest their property taxes. You can offer to pull comps for the previous year. If you're pulling comps for the previous year, pull January 1 through December 31 of the previous year. Don't pull comps like currently, like an appraiser would. Pull comps for last year, because that's the year that you're talking about protesting the value for. So provide those things. There are several opportunities to reach out. Make sure that everyone knows that they need to pay their taxes, or check to make sure their mortgage company paid their taxes toward the end of the year. All of those things are just another touch that you can have with your clients throughout the year. Mainly, I think where we can add the most value is make sure that they have whatever exemption paperwork they need in order to apply for exemptions to save some money. And then make sure that they have all the information that they need to adequately protest their property taxes come April, May timeframe. And you can talk them through, it's a little bit of a different conversation, because normally we're talking to them about all the great things about their property, all the things that are sellable, all the things that we can get more money for them. And then on this side of things, you're talking about all the bad things about the property. So just make sure, I've heard Tillman talking to people before saying, this is not being delicate with that conversation. Like, I don't think this about your property, but you need to be thinking all the worst when you're talking to the appraisal district about it. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think the property taxes just give us a lot of areas to add value and reach out to people. And I'm sure everybody's seen this meme. I thought it was a funny way to end. So how everyone sees your home, and the tax assessor, of course, sees it as a total mansion. And the appraiser sees it as a dilapidated shack. The inspector sees it as a termite infested cabin, and all of these things. I thought that was funny, so I wanted to include it in here. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to questions for a minute. We did have some questions in the chat that Tillman had answered. So once you file, I'm guessing the homestead exemption, is it automatically going to roll over for the following year? Tillman, do you want to talk to that?
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Yeah, so the homestead exemption is a one-time filing as long as you live in the property. But as soon as you move, yes, you would need to refile for your new home. I think somebody had asked if their client had received an application about refiling. Once you've filed in your current home, you should never have to refile. It should be good. I'm not sure if that's a scam or what that particular situation might be. But as long as you've got one on file, it should be good until you move. If they're buying a new home and selling their current one, the homestead exemption needs to be in whichever home they were living in as of January 1st. The other thing to remember or remind your clients is, especially with the appraisal district, it might seem somewhat confusing, but most times no news is good news, meaning if you file the exemption, they're not going to send you a letter saying, hey, your homestead exemption has been approved. You either have to periodically go online to double check the appraisal district website to see if they're applying that exemption. And then if it's denied, they will send you a letter saying it's been denied. You have 30 days to meet this particular item that we're still looking for. A lot of times with the exemption, you've got to mail in a copy of your photo ID and a current utility bill to show that you're actually living there. So a lot of times that's something that folks forget to do to provide a proof of that they're actually residing in that home as their actual homestead. So just a couple of things to kind of remind them of with regards to items they may have to send in with their exemption.
Perfect. We have a couple more questions on Facebook. So can someone protest for the current year if they're on a payment plan?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So if you're on a payment plan with Bear Appraisal District, you still retain the right to protest. A lot of times, there's no issue whatsoever with the appraisal district if you're on one of the payment plans. You still retain the right to protest each year. And the thing to remember is it's the value as of January 1. I think Kendall kind of alluded to that. So each year it's technically supposed to be a reset, a fresh look at the value. So each year, if you're looking to protest, you've got to file a new protest each year on that particular value.
Okay. What about military personnel who own a home but are renting it out while they are on another duty base? Can they still qualify for a homestead? No, right?
Technically, yes, they can. If it was their primary resident, if they at one point lived in the home and it was their primary resident, yes, they can file the homestead exemption. Now, if they leave, or go on active military duty, majority of the time that homestead exemption will be allowed to stay with the home. Now, obviously, yes, periodically, if you're renting it out, things like that, it may come into question. But a lot of times, if you can provide the appraisal district with some sort of documentation showing that you're on active leave, majority of the time they'll allow that homestead exemption to stick with it, because the thought process is yes, that at some point they're going to return home, and that's their intention, is to return to living in that home as their primary residence.
So basically, since they're not renting something out elsewhere or living elsewhere,
Yeah, if they haven't purchased to live somewhere,
gotcha.
I mean, now at any point, yes, it's always a risk. So renting it out could be a risk to it, just depending on who at the appraisal district is looking at it. But majority of the time, I would still have your client file the homestead exemption, and then if they get to the point where they have to go on active duty and it's in their best interest to rent the property, then move forward with that.
Okay. Tillman's very much in the camp of you got to try it. You got to be told no in terms to filing the homestead exemption and when you had to live there and all of that. So it kind of opens things up for us as realtors to share with our clients, instead of just making it so absolute you have to live there on January 1. So that's good info. Does anyone else have any questions? Throw them on Facebook or on the chat on Zoom. I think this is the most interaction we've ever had in a class. I told y'all it wouldn't be boring. So if I'll kind of start wrapping up here. I've talked a lot about just providing a value and trying to show value to your clients in different ways. That's pretty much what I want to talk about every time that I come on here and do one of these classes, is just how you can continue to show value to your clients so that they will continue referring you business and thinking of you first whenever they go to buy or sell, or whenever they have family that's going to buy or sell. You can offer your services for sure to their friends and family if they have anyone who have questions. have them contact you and you can be the go-to person to pull comps for them. I have a couple people in my database that I've been pulling comps for every year. I've never met them face to face. They found me, on Facebook or somewhere, and I've been pulling comps for them every year for 5 or 6 years around April. Just that's what they asked for when they first came to me, and so I know they're interested, so I do it every year. So I think that's about it. I don't see any other questions coming in. We have recorded this, so if you would like a copy of the recording, reach out to myself or Penelope or comment on Shift Talk, and we'll make sure and get the recording to you. If you need help finding any of the exemption paperwork, let me know. I'd be happy to help you find that. If you have any questions about any of the different types of exemptions or any specific property or specific situation, feel free to reach out to me or Tillman. I'm probably a little easier to find through Shift Talk, so I don't mind passing you along to him if you have any questions that he can answer for you that to help out a client or anyone like that. So if y'all also Shift Talk, tricks of the trade plug. If y'all have any topics that you would like to hear more about or learn more about, or that you think would make a great topic for this class going forward, let me know. Shoot me a message, comment on this video. I would love any and all ideas of what people are wanting to hear more about, or what you think would be valuable for you to learn in terms of growing your business and growing your database this year. So our goal is to do one of these a month toward the end of the month. And that's kind of what we've done for the last few months. Let me know if there are any topics that you would like to hear more about. And I think that's it. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Tillman, for being on here and answering all the questions and helping me prep for this. And until next time, I guess we'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Kendall. Thanks, Tillman.
Yeah, no problem. Y'all have a good one.
All right, see y'all later. Bye.